The quintessential piece of any race's roster is the legendary lords who will lead them. As you can see in this picture, my 4 picks for a race pack are Astragoth Ironhand, Drazoath the Ashen, Shar'Tor the Executioner, and Ghazak. I will go through each and speak on how they should play and why I picked them over any others. If you don't see any other particular character, don't worry, I am talking about more legendary characters in the next section of this video. The overarching reason for these 4 is that they cover all the facets of the roster whilst also differing from the same classic tanky footlord of the old world dwarves. Astragoth is our race leader, who would lead us as a potent caster, rivaling the greats and eventually pack a punch once encased in his sorceress construct. Drazoath would be a hybrid melee caster with a flying monstrous mount who would be an interesting rival to Astragoth within the Darklands. Shar'Tor would give us a monstrous cavalry lord who I could see being sent by Astragoth on a far-flung mission just about anywhere in the world. Also, assuming we don't see a true Hobgoblin Khanate race pack, my vote for a true Hobgoblin Khan to represent the slave population and, well, the Hobgoblins. None of the Khans are as fleshed out as Ghazak. After I talk about legendary characters, we will dip into generic lords and heroes and a surprise bonus character, so stick around because we have plenty of speculation to talk about. What would the Lizardmen be without Mazdamundi? The Dark Elves without Malekith? The Empire without Karl Franz? Or the Dwarves without High King Thorgrim Grudgebearer? This is the first among other questions I would ask to anyone who thinks Astragoth is not the top priority character in this race pack. Do you want to play an arguably greater arcane conduit level caster in a Gundam suit? Maybe the next. Astragoth Ironhand, High Priest of Hackheart, is the oldest living, most respected, and most powerful of the Chaos Dwarf sorcerer prophets. Or perhaps his powers have begun to wane too far as his body succumbs to petrification, as all stunties who wield magic will eventually experience. In the original lore, Astragoth was more of an infantry-sized cyborg who was...
He's more machine now than man.
...no longer at the height of his magical prowess. In later editions, kit-bashing, fan art, and fan-made supplements would see him get to a full-on mecha suit reminiscent of a Gundam. So here's what I propose. Give him 2 mounts. He would start on a palanquin, like Thorgrim or other petrified sorcerers I mentioned in my last video on Chaos Dwarf units. This might buff allies in the same way and give defensive boosts, but would render him useless as an offensive melee combatant and make him very slow. Between level 15 and 20, you would unlock his mechanical suit. The suit would make him essentially a highly armored mechanical monster. What I mean by that is he would become fast for a dwarf at maybe 40 speed and have the death blow rule. Though the death blow rule for slayers in Total War gives extra weapon damage and armor piercing at a certain threshold. In the army book, it meant that he could double the amount of attacks he has if he lands all 3. This seems more like the activatable Deadly Onslaught ability or Heroic Killing Blow, rather than the passive Slayer Death Blow. So I think he would get one of those activatables with the mount and perhaps a Torox-like self-explosion because it's a steam-driven piston suit. Astragoth is the greatest Chaos Dwarf sorcerer the world has ever known. A level 4 wizard, meaning he would deserve a greater arcane conduit who could cast from the lores of fire, metal, death, and Hackheart. I would like to see 2 skill lines for his magic, the first being the entire lore of Hackheart, the second being a well-curated mix of the other 3 lores that fill roles the lore of Hackheart does not already. If Astragoth is done the justice he deserves, he is an easy pick for me as the leader of this race pack. Personally, I would not want to see them douse any of his magical prowess because the mount ideas I already represent his petrification enough. And, we've seen in this game with, Rapunz and whatnot that we don't have to adhere strictly to the timeline, right? So, technically at this time, Astragoth his powers would be waning, and technically Ghorth would be a little bit more powerful, but I think, scratch that idea. Let's make Astragoth all he can be. I hope they update Astragoth with some unique magic items as well, to be up to snuff with other characters in this regard. As far as Astragoth's faction and its playstyle, he would focus on buffing Sorcerer Prophet Lords, Demonsmith heroes, war machines, artillery, and perhaps even Bull Centaurs who protect the priest's temples. He may receive some general buffs to all units as well, to represent him being the lord of all the Chaos Dwarves. Being in the Tower of Zar-Nagrund, he might also focus on buffing slaves and economy. He would have any race mechanics tied directly to the Darklands, such as the Mega Train I spoke of in the mechanics video. The only other Chaos Dwarf Lord we would need is Astragoth's rival, Drazoath the Ashen. Astragoth was directly responsible for Drazoath's exile, when he was just a minor demonsmith. Drazoath is a sorcerer prophet of Hackheart, the Lord of the Black Fortress and the Master of the Legion of Asgore. Of all characters, he is the fan favorite and comes highly expected in this race pack. The most eye-catching part of him is the unique name mount Cinderbreath. He would have to unlock the mount around level 15 to 20 to balance its power. Cinderbreath is a Bale Taurus, which I detail in the units video I previously put out. If you haven't already, go check that video out. This means Drazoath will have a flying mount with a flaming mortis engine, constituted by the Blazing Body rule, and the Fueled by Fire rule, which means fire damage will heal him. One thing I forgot to mention in my previous video, though, about the Bale Taurus, is that it has flaming breath attacks similar to a dragon. On top of this incredible mount, Drazoath is a potent spellcaster of the lore of Hackheart and a very capable warrior. All of this, I think, gives him the edge over Astragoth to be the strongest one-man doom stack the Dowie Tsar have to offer. Unlike Astragoth, he got a little more fleshed out in tabletop with 3 unique items. First is a talisman with the Hellshard Amulet. This item would give Drazoath ward save, perhaps 20%, and damage reflection, perhaps plus 20. Second, for his weapon, is the Graven Scepter. The scepter would give Drazoath magic attacks, and perhaps anything in the range of armor piercing, armor sundering, weapon strength, or melee attack. Or perhaps it has some unique ability to sunder magic or physical resistance, stripping it from the enemy. Thirdly, an arcane item named the Demon Spite Crucible. The most obvious effect of this item is increasing spell potency and decreasing miscast chance, which is definitely useful to offset the Sorcerer's Curse. The other effect it had in tabletop was that if Drazoath or Cinderbreath killed an enemy wizard, that effect would be doubled. This is very specific and doesn't translate well to Total War, so of course I have an alternate proposition. Lorefully, he is the Sorcerer Prophet best known for demon binding, so I propose the item gives him Summonable Kadai, either 2 Fireborn on a cooldown or 1 Destroyer. Kadai are the demons of Hackheart. Again, check out the units video if you haven't already, and some of the things in this video will make more sense. Moving on to what parts of the unit roster Drazoath buffs in the faction's general playstyle. Obviously, he would buff Kadai and perhaps all the Taurus variants. The Infernal Guard are a warrior cult flourishing from the Black Fortress, and similar to their master, Drazoath live in an internal exile, defending the Darklands from their southern citadel. This is to say, I think he will focus on fielding these elite infantry as well. He may have buffs to war machines and artillery, seeing as those units are suffused with demonic spirits. For his faction, while Astragoth will focus more on infrastructure, Drazoath will focus on war, and while Astragoth may have negative diplomatic relations with the Legion of Asgore, Drazoath might have negative diplomatic relations with all Chaos Dwarves, with extra towards Astragoth. The Legion of Asgore will focus more on trying to reclaim Zarnagrond rather than defend it. They may also have increased campaign movement range for this reason, and to reflect their need to herd or cull the monster population in the desolation of Asgore. With Drazoath and Astragoth, we have two characters that really start to separate the Chaos Dwarves from the Old World Dwarves. Being spellcasters with monstrous mounts, the next two lords beyond them will truly solidify the Chaos Dwarves as a unique race. Our first two lords, armies on the battlefield, will play defensively, similar to traditional dwarves, while Shar'Tor and Ghazak would push the offensive style. Shar'Tor the Executioner, warrior priest and favored headsman of Hackheart, lord of the Bull Centaurs, a Forge World Age of Sigmar character who was originally supposed to be a fantasy character, but due to Games Workshop having some scheduling conflicts, it never came to be. Personally, I see no reason this should impede him being brought into Total War, and I will be massively disappointed if CA skips out on this awesome-looking character. He is the only option available to bring us a monstrous character, whether it be in Lord or hero form. On the battlefield, I imagine him acting between a world beater like Torox or Kolek and a support lord like Volkmar or Kastalton. While perhaps not being as strong as those lords in their roles, maybe he'll be stronger for having the hybrid role. His unique items help paint the picture of this hybrid role. The Darktide Axe is a cruel weapon with burning vile runes of hatred and malice, so the weapon would give him magical and flaming attacks. Murderous spirits are bound within the axe, increasing each time Shar'Tor slays an enemy with them. Lorefully, this could work much like any of the Coronate abilities that increase weapon strength intensity with each kill made by that unit. Perhaps it would affect more than Shar'Tor, but also any Bull Centaur units or heroes within the Lord's army, maybe at a reduced rate to Shar'Tor's own ability. The Mask of the Executioner is an armor piece that empowers him with the ability to call out Hackheart's name with such force that it can kill the weak of heart and fill those loyal to Hackheart with unholy wrath. Like the Darktide Axe, the mask contains many malign spirits that can be unleashed upon their foes. I think this would translate to an activated ability on a cooldown, similar to a Gaze of Cain from Hellebron, mixed with like a Mortis engine. It would rampage allies, but would give them increased melee attack and leadership, whilst additionally dealing damage over time to enemies within Shar'Tor's aura. Shar'Tor had a unfortunate name, but had some other unique abilities outside of his magic items, the first being Trampling Gore, which could act as a passive, granting additional charge bonus and weapon strength to both centaurs in his army or aura. Lord of the Bahal could be a similar passive or skill that buffs charge bonus or speed and vigor for both centaurs instead. Shar'Tor on the campaign map would focus on building and buffing monster and cavalry-based armies. Primarily, this would benefit Bull Centaur lords, heroes, and units, but may also include Tauros and its variants, Kadai, giants, and Bull Centaur-operated war machines such as the Whirlwind, the Tenderizer, and the Juggernaut siege tower. His faction may also buff sorcerers, since Bull Centaur's primary role is as the priest protectors. Shar'Tor's lore in the fantasy world is yet to be written, which makes him a prime candidate to be on some far-flung mission. This could be anywhere from the Chaos Wastes, Cathay, Lustria, or someplace else. That adds an interesting start position for the race that is outside of the Darklands. For these reasons, he may see buffs to campaign movement range maybe in a similar form to Khorne mechanics, letting you attack settlements and get movement range thereafter. This would help differentiate his faction further. Technically, all Bull Centaurs should have the Crushing Hooves passive ability, but perhaps it may be unique to all Bull Centaurs within Shar'Tor's faction. I think the obvious effect of this passive is an increase to charge bonus, unit mass, and just general disruption. But additionally, I would like to see it give armor sundering damage whilst a charge is active. Shar'Tor would be a really fun, different, and interesting lord for the Chaos Dwarves. Fingers crossed that we see him implemented in the game. Before we talk about the final lord and my vision for the race pack, there are a few things to consider. Slaves will surely be an integral mechanic, but how strongly will they impact the roster? How likely is it that we will get a Hobgoblin Khanate race pack? Does it make more sense to have Hobgoblins as a sub-race faction within the Chaos Dwarfs? Personally, this is my prediction for how CA will handle it. Drop the CD race pack with the tried and true formula for Vampirates and Tomb Kings. 3 Chaos Dwarf Lords with 1 Hobgoblin sub-race. Then eventually they can add 1 more character for each, so for Chaos Dwarfs and Hobgoblins, if they wanted to do that for a possible total of 6 Lords. This is assuming the trilogy will keep receiving content to, upwards of like 2030 and beyond, which I sincerely hope it does. As one article I read said, some gamers are going to start playing this game and just never stop. I consider myself absolutely one of those folks, especially considering how great our modding community is. So even after CA, I don't even want to say it, but, even after CA, might stop updating the game. That's just a sad thing to say, but we'll still have modders, right? We'll still have modders beyond that. But yeah, that's my hope, like 2030 at least. But, we'll see how life goes. Anyways, back to the matter, though. A Hobgoblin character is the last piece of the puzzle. Some would jump to Gorduz Backstabber, but Gorduz was a hero, not a lord, and was based just in the Darklands. We already have 2 lords in the Darklands, and if we are going to have a Hobgoblin sub-race, then personally, I want a proper Khan. Now I will be merely glossing over Ghazak Khan and the Hobgoblins here because I will be expanding on them in another video I have planned. There are half a dozen named Khans and Hobgoblins, but Ghazak is easily the most fleshed out. While he is not technically the Hob-Gobla Khan, which is the title of the Khan, overlord of all Khans, he is the greatest Khan to venture out of the Eastern Steppes. So his start position could be there, or near there in Cathay or the Mountains of Morn, but he also ventured all the way to the southern kingdoms of the world. Maybe he could evict Scrag from his unwanted position. All Hobgoblin lords have a wolf mount, but Ghazak has the only unique and named wolf, Worgan. Warg, like Lord of the Rings. But yeah, Worgan. On top of this, he is the only Hobgoblin who has 2 named unique magic items. First is the Demon Head Helmet, which can summon a wind demon, and the second is the Red Scimitar, which is the weapon of every Black Wolf clan Khan before him. On top of this, he wields a shield and bow, like all other Khans except Gore does. If that doesn't convince you Ghazak is the better option, then I'm not sure what will. The choice being an assassin-type slave lord, or basically Warhammer Genghis Khan. Easy choice for me. Again, Ghazak could be like a cavalry lord with like and also a sniper, so it's like a skirmisher, a Lithanar type, kind of. Moving on to other legendary characters and pseudo-legendary lords, Zhatan the Black is the commander of Tsar Nagrand. Though Astragoth, as the High Priest of Hashit, has authority over him, Zhatan is the leader of the armies and oversees the day-to-day decisions on infrastructure and more. As with some other characters in this section, they could alternatively be legendary lords, but I think I think they might make better pseudo legendary lords or heroes. We must also consider hierarchy in that Ghorth is second only to Astragoth. Ghorth is who Zhatan takes orders from at this point in time, since Astragoth is nearing complete petrification at this time. Drazoath and Hothgar are less powerful sorcerer prophets who operate outside of the Tsar-Nagrand hierarchy anyways. Shar'Tor is Hashit's most favored and the most revered protector of the sorcerer prophets. Zhatan is the supreme commander of all Chaos Dwarf legions, and Rykarth is a lord, but mostly known for leading the Immortals, which is a unit, an elite warrior sect I spoke of in my last video. Ghazak also exists technically out of Chaos Dwarf hierarchy, but if he did exist within, it would be below all Chaos Dwarves, but above Gorduz. So this is how my ideal lineup would unfold. I really think Astragoth and Zhatan deserve to exist within the same faction, whether a legendary lord, hero, or pseudo. Zhatan is a dark version of what we have seen in the old world dwarfs, which is why I am more interested in seeing Astragoth brought in by Creative Assembly. I can live with a mod version of Zhatan. I need CA Astragoth. I do think Zhatan as Lord and Astragoth as hero would be a similar start to Ghorok and Lord Krok, which is a heck yes from me. I just really want to see Astragoth. Rykarth would be a good pseudo for anyone, but maybe he could be a hero as well that Drazoath could start with, which maybe it doesn't make sense lorefully, but just ideas. I want Shar'Tor because he is the only current loreful monster lord option. It would be disappointing if he wasn't, but in Age of Sigmar, he is technically a hero option. In this case, I think he would make a good hero for Ghorth the Cruel, since Ghorth is just less cool Astragoth. Tying him in with Shar'Tor makes good sense on this far-flung mission. If there is one hobgoblin I need to see CA implement, it's Ghazak, who in my opinion is the greatest hobgoblin, at least living, in this current time. I would love to see Gorduz as well, but only in addition to Ghazak. But hey, let me know in the comments what your lineup and thoughts are, but before you do, stick around because we have more legendary characters to consider. I thought it wise to unpack my thinking, though, in this time of interlude of sorts. Zhatan would be probably most similar to an old world dwarf like Ungrim, the most powerful duelist the Dawizar have to offer, whether lord or hero. The original army book gives him Taurus variant mounts, but I feel then he would be bargain bin Drazoath in a way. Still be a better duelist, but he in later editions would take no mounts, which makes more sense. Zhatan is a boots to the ground kind of leader. His melee prowess is greater than that of all the Dawizar. With a single blow from his black hammer, he can pulverize the bones of ogres or liquefy goblins. The Black Hammer of Hashit is his first magic item and weapon. This would give fire and magical attacks and perhaps up to 500 weapon strength. It may also cause flammable to enemies. The Obsidian armor is a unique suit of black shard armor fused with the flesh of a dead petrified sorcerer. It gives the wearer high armor and increased physical, magical, and flaming resistance. The Onyx amulet is a talisman that is the bane of all magic. The wearer is not affected by any magical spells, whether from a foe or friend. Additionally, any units engaged in melee with Zhatan would not be able to cast spells, including bound spells. Zhatan also had a rule called Slave Tyrant, which would give friendly hobgoblin units a boost to leadership, and he himself would cause terror to all enemy greenskins, including orcs, goblins, hobgoblins, and noblars. For faction and campaign skills and buffs, he would focus foremost on the acquisition of slaves, the armies that do the acquiring, the slave economy, and his own melee prowess. Then we have Rykarth the Unbreakable, captain of the Immortals. Where Zhatan might focus offense and anti-infantry, Rykarth might focus defense and anti-large. He wouldn't destroy mobs of chaff, quite like Zhatan, but he could sit and eat damage from one for longer. After all, he would be unbreakable, obviously, as well as any immortal units under his command. No mounts, but would have 2 magic items. The Cursed Rune Axe is a larger version of the weapons the Immortals carry, which is already a great weapon. It may have high AP or even armor sundering. It may also cause some sort of stun effect. I forgot to mention, the Immortals are elite warriors who act as the police who investigate with intense scrutiny all Chaos Dwarfs of status, including lords and even high priests. They additionally wore unique marble and granite armor, which, to do this role of policing sorcerer prophets and whatnot, it gave them higher resistance from magical attacks than black shard armor, but with lower resistance to flaming attacks. Rykarth has the armor of Ghazak, which would assumedly also be a suit of this granite armor. The armor would essentially make him near unkillable, high resistances to everything in ward save. On the campaign map, he would buff Immortals, and if loyalty is a mechanic for Dwarfs, he would have skills to keep them at their best. I think he would also do something in the way, since like him and the Immortals are like the military police kind of. Maybe he buffs public order, and again, loyalty, and if that is a mechanic. Ghorth the Cruel in the current time is technically the most potent of all sorcerers, though he still answers to Astragoth, oldest and wisest. Even in Astragoth's petrified state, his powers are near matched. We have seen with characters like Rapance that everyone is on board with fudging time to get more characters introduced to the game. That is why I hope they make Astragoth very powerful and playable, whether lord or hero. If Astragoth does end up being a hero, though, this would leave more room for Ghorth as a lord. This is because Ghorth is essentially discount Astragoth with no Gundam suit or mount in general to speak of. At least that we know of, yeah. They can certainly make him one. If Astragoth is a legendary lord, like I would personally prefer, perhaps Ghorth could be an unlockable pseudo-legendary lord in Zaranagron faction, or Shar'Tor's. Or perhaps he could be a hero for Shar'Tor, who is providing protection on his far-flung mission, or vice versa. Ghorth as lord and Shar'Tor as hero, which would probably make more sense lorefully. I want that bull centaur lord. Ghorth, like Astragoth, is a level 4 wizard who could wield all 4 Chaos Dwarf Lords of Magic, Fire, Metal, Death, and Hackheart, which may provide reason for him to get a greater arcane conduit as well as Astragoth. He does not usually fight in battles lorefully, but if he did in Total War, perhaps they could create a new, unique Lamassu mount for him to make him a bit more interesting. I'm not sure these magic items are technically loreful, so take these with a grain of salt, but he might wield the Axe of Ghorth, which would make basically all his weapon damage AP and give magical and flaming attacks. It may also give additional buffs when fighting specific hated foes like other dwarfs and greenskins. The Amulet of Hackheart, a talisman, may make himself and allies within his aura have the Frenzy rule, which means immune to psychology and a bevy of offensive melee buffs. It would also give him something around 10 to 15% ward save. The Chalice of Fire, an arcane item, may work as a one-use ability where you could target an enemy spellcaster and essentially remove all winds of magic from the enemy's current pool, but perhaps would not be able to touch the magic reserve to be balanced. Ghorth could be really interesting, but it would be dumb if we got into the game before Astragoth, in my opinion. Gorduz Backstabber, along with Zhatan and Astragoth, was one of the first named characters in the original army book. Therefore, I can see why people want to see him included. The problem I have is that I've seen a decent amount of people say that Gorduz should be a lord, and that's just not what he was. At least in tabletop, he could not lead armies, though lorefully is referred to as a chieftain. Looking throughout all Chaos Dwarf material, I found that Gorduz was never fleshed out or given any meaningful further detail beyond his original conception. Beyond this, he would be an assassin type who gets a generic wolf. To me, the character is pretty flat. And if we were to only get one hobgoblin character, I would much rather see Ghazak Khan. Same situation as Ghorth, I would love to see Gorduz, just not before Ghazak. Unless there is a Hobgoblin Khanate race coming. I don't think that's going to happen, but who knows. For a special rule, he might have Fated Lucky Sneaky, giving him ward save if his health drops below a set threshold. For a magic weapon, he might have Eye Gouger, which would give him poisoned attacks, killing blow, and increased armor-piercing damage. I could not confirm if this item was loreful. Tell me in the comments if you know. But wait, there is another dwarf character that is not as widely known about by the community. Thing is, I don't think he would be technically in the dwarf roster. For Hothgar is a renegade Chaos Dwarf sorcerer who is the most famous engineer of their race. He built iron demons and juggernaut siege towers for Norskin, or, depending on how you look at it, Warriors of Chaos Invasion, led by Lord Mortkin. Again, depending on how you look at it. Mortkin could function for either of those races, but I've talked about him before and plan to more in the future. So if you would like to see that, absolutely pulverize that subscribe button. All we need to know for how is that for now is that if Lord Mortkin came to the game, I would absolutely die if Hothgar was his legendary hero. Having a near ever-chosen level leader and fighter paired with the Dawizar Sorcerer of the Forge and the Norskin or Warriors of Chaos roster sounds like a match made in heaven. Hothgar would introduce Chorf elements to Mortkin's faction, primarily in recruiting certain Chorf war machines and artillery units. He would focus on buffing those units, and perhaps CA could give him one of these machines as a mount for fun and style. While it's not at the level of power of Astragoth or Ghorth, Hothgar is a potent mixed lore sorcerer of the lores of fire and metal. For magic items, perhaps he could get a unique set of black shard armor and a unique Hellfire pistol. Hellfire pistols being magically enchanted guns that fire shrapnel blazing with magical flame. But wait, there is a bonus character who is technically not a Chaos Dwarf. At least that is not his origin. Tordrek Hackheart was one of the top dwarf engineers in Barrack Far, second only to Redbrock Gunnarsson. It was his hate for his rival that led to attempted murder, which led to exile, which led him to the Darklands. Though Redbrock was the better engineer, Hackheart was the undisputed master of the submersible ironcraft, submarines, basically. Tordrek Hackheart has perhaps the most terrifyingly advanced vessel in the seas of Warhammer. The Black Kraken is a massive, grotesquely modified submarine with tentacles of barbed gromril. It is said he traveled to the most hellish of docks, Zogozar, the black port of the Chaos Dwarves. It is said with the knowledge he gained from the Lost Brethren, He bound a demon of the deep sea to the Black Kraken. Tordrek now is a captain of the Dread Fleet, under the command of Count Noctilus. I will talk about the Dread Fleet and a rework I would like to see perhaps in a Vampire Coast race rework in the future. My hope is that Tordrek and the other Dread Fleet captains will become pseudo-legendary lords to replace the current tech tree pseudos, but only for Noctilus and the Dread Fleet, not the rest of the Vampire Coast. And since we are talking about the future of the Vampire Coast, my subs will know what time it is. It's that obligatory time to ring that bell. The only legendary Lord Vampire Coast needs is a shark man of Stromfell's character, leading a fish people subrace. For more on that, check out my Lords Who Deserve Shipbuilding video. I put a lot of love into that video. So go show it some love back. I would appreciate more than you can know. But before we go, let's quickly overview what is probably already obvious, but alas, the generic Lords, Heroes, Mounts, and Lords of Magic. Our Lords lineup as the generic versions are basically the generic versions of each of my Legendary Lord picks. Sorcerer Prophet is generic Astragoth or Ghorth. Infernal Overlord is generic Drazoath or Zhatan, though Drazoath is a sorcerer, technically, and the Overlord is not. Bull Centaur Tordrek are generic Shar'Tor, and Hobgoblin Khan is, you guessed it, Ghazak. And all that gives us a caster, a warrior, a monster, and a chaff lord. Then the heroes are just agent levels of the lords, with demon smiths as casters, infernal castellans as warriors, bull centaurs as monsters, and hobgoblin big bosses for chaff leading. For caster, they would buff magic, machines, and demons. Warriors would focus on buffing infantry, bull centaurs buff monsters, and hobgoblins buff slaves. Another note on roles is that the bull centaurs are monstrous cavalry, but also play support similar to a warrior priest or patriarch, as we kind of discussed with Shar'Tor. Hobgoblins should be cavalry archer characters, very good at sniping, skirmishing, and general assassination type tactics, whilst riding on wolfback, which brings us to mounts. All hobgoblin characters would get giant wolf mounts, and I would like it to see in a hobgoblin subrace, maybe again led by Ghazak, that all big bosses, hobgoblin big bosses, or just lords, heroes, characters in general, could start with a giant wolf, kind of similar to Tic-Tac-Toe or Bretonia, in that way, because their horde moving on wolfback is kind of their whole thing. It's essential to their culture, their survival in general. Sorcerers, especially if petrified, could have a palanquin mount, which is essentially shield bearers. The altar of Hackheart may be reminiscent of perhaps Thoric's anvil or a chaos war shrine. It would increase magical potency of the sorcerer, whether lord or hero, as well as giving powerful bound abilities that are used in exchange for killing of entities from a friendly slave unit. So, kind of like I forget the name right at the moment, but the dark elf spell where you leech your own health and gives you whatever it gives you, winds of magic or whatever. Whereas here, you would have to take that health from any slave unit, basically the greenskins. You'd take the health from that and kill off some of the entities in that unit while taking health. But in exchange for these powerful bound abilities, which would essentially act like runes from the dwarfs, I think. The Baal Taurus and Lamassu would be Lord-only mounts. The Taurus for the Infernal Overlord and the Lamassu for the Sorcerer Prophet. And as already stated, the 4 lores for Sorcerer, Prophets, and Demon Smiths are Hashit, Fire, Death, and Metal. But as Hashit is a rare lore, it may be Lord exclusive. But finally, that wraps up all the possible Chaos Dwarf characters we could know of at this point. If you guys enjoyed this content, please like, comment, subscribe, and perhaps share. Even just one of those things goes a long way. Also, please tell me in the comments which character was your favorite. Who are you most excited to play? What is your ideal Lord lineup? And what characters would you make heroes or pseudos, or whatever you feel? Stay tuned as I begin to close out this Chaos Dwarf series, as there are still a thing or two more to address. After that, I'm getting back to other races soon, I swear. But again, I've made a playlist, so go check out my playlist, and there's a Chaos Dwarf playlist, so you can just click that and then, watch all the Chaos Dwarf videos together. Which again, I kind of planned all together. So, what details might not make, I don't know, sense in one video, I probably detailed it out in another video. Kind of like I talked about with the units. Anyways, I hope y'all have a great day, and thanks for joining. I'm Redbeard, and this was Chaos Dwarf Characters. Fare thee well.